Think about the last time you were truly overwhelmed, the kind of exhaustion that settles deep in your bones, where the air feels heavy and the walls close in. In that exact moment, if someone asked how you were doing, what did you say? You probably smiled, adjusted your posture, and said you were entirely fine. You always say you are fine. You have built a massive architecture of survival around being the person who does not need help, the one who carries the weight, the one who figures it out while everyone else falls apart. People praise you for this constantly. They call you resilient, mature, and incredibly capable. They deeply admire your independence. But beneath that flawless execution of daily life, there is an invisible psychological debt accumulating, a relentless friction in your nervous system that refuses to shut down. You are not independent because you inherently want to be. You are fiercely independent because, at a critical point in your development, relying on others was fundamentally unsafe. It was either impossible, deeply unpredictable, or strictly conditional. You learned very early that if you did not handle the situation, absolutely no one else would step in. You became the emotional thermostat for the household, constantly reading facial cues, anticipating complex needs, and making yourself as useful as required to maintain fragile equilibrium. The profound tragedy is that your brain categorized this premature adaptation as completely normal. It wired your baseline reality to equate safety with total isolation. Now, as an adult, the perceived threat has long passed, but your physical body is still keeping a strict tally. You are operating a highly sophisticated defense mechanism, cleverly disguised as a desirable personality trait. Consider how this plays out in your daily social interactions. You are the designated listener, the relentless problem solver, the one who absorbs the chaotic energy of the room and neutralizes it. People gravitate toward you because you project absolute stability. They bring you their crises, their confusion, and their heavy emotions, fully expecting you to process them. And you do it automatically, almost unconsciously, because your brain has been rigorously trained to secure your position in any social hierarchy by being undeniably useful. You have mastered the art of being low maintenance. You never ask for favors, you never impose, and you never let your own discomfort inconvenience anyone else. Society rewards this behavior immensely. They call it being a good friend, a mature partner, or a reliable colleague. But this constant social misreading is a trap. People assume that because you can handle everything, you never need to be held. They mistake your high tolerance for stress as a lack of emotional needs. What they do not see is the staggering internal cost of maintaining this facade. Every time you swallow a request for help, every time you suppress your own exhaustion to accommodate someone else, you are reinforcing a profound neurological isolation. You are actively teaching your nervous system that your needs are dangerous to express. You are not simply choosing to be strong. You are trapped in a compulsive performance of strength. The cost of this performance is a creeping, pervasive emptiness that settles in when the door closes and you are finally alone. You are surrounded by people who rely on you, yet you remain entirely unseen by them. The isolation is not physical. It is the devastating psychological reality of being necessary to everyone, but truly known by absolutely no one. This specific dynamic ensures that your deepest wounds are entirely invisible. This pervasive emptiness is not merely an emotional metaphor. It is a profound neurological depletion. When a child is forced to absorb the emotional volatility or structural incompetence of the adults around them, their developing nervous system is subjected to chronic, unyielding pressure. You are effectively assigned the cognitive workload of a fully developed prefrontal cortex before yours was even halfway formed. The immediate biological response is to lock the autonomic nervous system into a chronic state of sympathetic arousal. You are constantly scanning the horizon for the next disaster, the next shift in mood, the next problem that you will inevitably have to solve. Over years, this hypervigilance becomes your baseline frequency. The exhaustion you feel in your bones right now is not the result of a long workday or a busy week. It is the cumulative biological debt of operating an emergency protocol for decades. You have conditioned your body to treat peace as a highly suspicious anomaly. When things are finally quiet, when there are no immediate crises to manage, your nervous system does not register safety. It registers a terrifying lack of data. It assumes the silence is simply the prelude to a more catastrophic drop. This is why you cannot truly rest. Why lying still feels like a structural failure. Why you immediately seek out a new task, a new problem, or a new person to manage? You are desperately trying to give your hyperactive threat detection system something to do so it stops turning its agonizing focus inward. The mechanism is brutally efficient. By constantly organizing the external world, you manufacture a temporary illusion of internal control. You believe that if you can just anticipate every variable, you will never be caught off guard again. But the human body was never designed to process this volume of existential data without breaking down. The chronic elevation of cortisol and adrenaline slowly erodes your physical resilience. Your muscles remain tight, your shoulders are permanently braced, and your sleep is shallow and easily disrupted. You are not experiencing normal adult fatigue. You are enduring the delayed physiological shockwave of a childhood where vulnerability was a luxury you simply could not afford. The architecture of your independence is built entirely on the foundation of an unresolved panic. This biological debt does not remain contained within your own physical exhaustion. It actively seeks a target, bleeding into the very architecture of your adult relationships. You might wonder why you continually find yourself entangled with people who require saving, organizing, or extensive emotional management. This is not a coincidence, nor is it simply a streak of bad luck. You are subconsciously replicating the exact environmental conditions of your childhood because, paradoxically, chaos is the only frequency your nervous system knows how to navigate with absolute competence. When you meet someone who is struggling, chaotic, or emotionally unavailable, your brain does not register a red flag. It registers a job description. It recognizes a familiar systemic failure and immediately deploys the only identity that ever guaranteed your survival, which is the indispensable caretaker. You confuse the desperate act of being needed with the quiet safety of being loved. This is a profound miscalibration of attachment. If a relationship is stable, if a partner is entirely self-sufficient and does not require your constant intervention, a deep, unsettling anxiety begins to build within you. You start to question your value in their life. You wonder what purpose you serve if you are not actively holding their world together. The terrifying thought creeping in is that if you are not useful, you are entirely disposable. So, you unconsciously sabotage the peace. You provoke, you overstep, or you subtly encourage their dependency just to reassure yourself that you still have a secure place in the dynamic. You are trapped in an identity that demands you be the strongest person in the room, effectively guaranteeing that you will always be surrounded by people who will drain you. You resent them for leaning on you so heavily, but the devastating truth is that you secretly need them to lean. You need their helplessness to validate your strength. Without a crisis to manage, without a fractured person to fix, you are forced to confront the quiet, terrifying reality of your own unaddressed pain. You are forced to look at the massive void where your own childhood should have been. The armor you wear is not just keeping others out, it is actively keeping you locked inside a role you never actually chose to play. This psychological architecture guarantees a lifetime of exhaustion disguised as immense competence. Consider the profound arrogance of your independence. You have convinced yourself that you do not need anyone, that your ability to self-soothe and self-manage is a sign of superior emotional evolution. But if we strip away the socially acceptable label of being highly capable, what remains is an incredibly rigid, almost tyrannical illusion of control. You are not protecting yourself from the incompetence of others. You are frantically protecting yourself from the agonizing vulnerability of having to ask for help and facing the possibility of rejection. To ask for help requires you to admit that your internal resources are finite, which fundamentally threatens the only identity that has ever kept you safe. You equate having needs with being a burden. In your developmental years, being a burden meant being ignored, criticized, or abandoned. So you constructed a reality where you are the provider, the rock, the unshakable foundation. But this is a psychological trap. By refusing to let anyone support you, you are actively denying others the opportunity to love you in your weakest moments. You curate a version of yourself that is entirely bulletproof, and then you secretly mourn the fact that no one ever tries to check if you are bleeding beneath the armor. This is the ultimate identity inversion. Your greatest strength is actually your most paralyzing fear. You are terrified that if you drop the act, if you let the exhaustion show, the people around you will realize you are just as fragile as they are, and they will leave. You believe they only stay because of what you can do for them, not because of who you are. This core belief forces you to constantly earn your space in the world through endless utility. You do not know how to simply exist without paying rent in the form of extreme competence. The tragedy is that by maintaining absolute control over every outcome, you are completely locking yourself out of the one thing you actually crave, which is the experience of being held without conditions. You are suffocating inside a fortress of your own brilliant design. Every wall you built to keep the unpredictability of human disappointment away is now functioning as a perfectly polished mirror, reflecting only your profound, self-inflicted isolation back at you. Let us step back and look at the broader architecture of this dynamic. You are not an anomaly. In almost every family structure, every friend group, and every corporate environment, there is someone exactly like you. Society runs on the silent, uncompensated labor of people who are conditioned to believe that their mere existence is a debt they must constantly repay through extreme utility. We look at the high achievers, the people who effortlessly manage multiple crises, the ones who never drop a single ball, and we call them successful. We label them as natural leaders or the reliable backbone of the community. But this societal applause is actually a profound form of collective gaslighting. It normalizes your trauma by turning it into a highly marketable skill set. The world does not want you to heal because your hypervigilance is incredibly convenient for everyone else. When you are the one anticipating every failure and catching every falling plate, the people around you are allowed to remain comfortably incompetent. They do not have to grow because you are doing the growing for them. You have essentially become an emotional shock absorber for the world. But an absorber does not magically make the impact disappear. It takes the violence of the blow into its own structure so that the rest of the vehicle does not feel it. This is why the cost you are paying is so completely invisible to the outside world, yet so structurally devastating to you. Normalizing this cost means recognizing that your chronic fatigue, your sudden bouts of unexplained anger, and your deep, isolating sadness are not signs that you are failing at being strong. They are the exact, mathematically predictable results of a biological system that's been running an emergency protocol for 20 years. The human body is simply not designed to process the emotional regulatory needs of multiple adults while simultaneously trying to develop its own foundational sense of self. You are essentially asked to build a house while actively holding up the sky, so of course your foundation is cracked. Of course the walls feel like they are constantly vibrating with an invisible tension. The complication arises when you finally realize that the armor is killing you, but taking it off feels like a completely impossible risk. Who are you if you are not the one holding everything together? If you stop solving problems, if you stop anticipating the emotional weather of the room, if you simply sit down and state that you are tired, what happens to your identity? The terrifying complication is the deeply ingrained belief that if you stop being useful, you will instantly become invisible. You are caught in a brutal psychological paradox where the very mechanism keeping you safe from abandonment is the exact same mechanism ensuring you are never truly loved for simply existing. You are loved for your function, not your form. And as long as you continue to flawlessly execute that function, you will never allow the people in your life the opportunity to prove that they could love you even if you did absolutely nothing for them. You are actively denying yourself the cure out of a desperate fear that the medicine will destroy you. You are choosing the familiar agony of holding the world over the terrifying uncertainty of putting it down. This is the ultimate trap of growing up too fast. You survive the childhood, but you spend your entire adulthood defending against ghosts that have long since left the room. The silence that follows is deafening. It forces you to confront the devastating realization that the battle ended years ago, but you are still standing on the front lines, fully armed, waiting for an attack that is never going to come. You are actively guarding an empty fortress. The ultimate trade-off of growing up too fast is a brutal transaction you made without ever realizing it. You traded the chaotic unpredictability of relying on broken adults for the suffocating certainty of relying entirely on yourself. In doing so, you secured your physical and emotional survival, but the currency you paid with was your capacity to experience profound, unguarded connection. This is the tragic paradox of your hyper-independence. The very mechanism that kept you safe is now the exact barrier keeping you utterly isolated. Let us look closer at the neurological architecture of this trade-off. Your nervous system is not broken, it is simply executing a brilliantly outdated survival script. When you were young, predicting the emotional weather of your caregivers and neutralizing their volatility was a matter of psychological life and death. Your brain wired itself to associate vigilance with safety. Therefore, when you attempt to relax, when you try to let someone else take the wheel, your amygdala fires a massive warning signal. It perceives the absence of control not as peace, but as an imminent, terrifying vulnerability. You are physically incapable of dropping your guard because your body genuinely believes that if you stop managing the environment will immediately destroy you. This clarifies why intimacy feels so exhausting for you. True intimacy requires the exact opposite of your survival strategy. It demands that you reveal the parts of yourself that are incompetent, tired, and deeply frightened. But how can you possibly expose those soft underbellies when your entire identity is built on being the impenetrable fortress? You are caught in a relentless psychological tug-of-war. A deep, aching part of you desperately wants to be taken care of, to be told that you can finally put the heavy burdens down. Yet, the moment someone actually tries to carry your weight, a much louder, terrified part of your brain aggressively pushes them away, convinced they will inevitably drop you. You are starved for the very support you continuously reject. This leaves you standing at the edge of a terrifying precipice. You fully understand that the armor is suffocating you, that the chronic exhaustion is eroding your spirit, and that the lonely pedestal of extreme competence is a miserable place to live. But the alternative is stepping into the absolute void. If you strip away the usefulness, the constant problem-solving, and the relentless caretaking of others, what is left beneath the heavy iron? If you are no longer the one holding the world together, who are you? That question is the most terrifying threshold you will ever stand before. You have spent your entire life believing that your inherent worth is permanently attached to your extreme utility. You think that if you put the heavy armor down, you will simply evaporate into the background, becoming entirely invisible to the people who currently depend on you. But this is the final, cruelest lie your childhood trauma ever told you. You do not have to continuously earn your right to exist in any room. You do not need to be perpetually useful to be profoundly worthy of love. The chronic exhaustion you feel is the desperate, silent screaming of a child who was never allowed to simply be a child. The brilliant nervous system that kept you alive is now the exact cage keeping you permanently trapped. But stepping out of that cage does not mean you are suddenly fixed or instantly healed. It means you are finally willing to tolerate the agonizing discomfort of not being in absolute control. It means looking at the people in your life and daring to let them see you fail. Will they still stay when you are no longer the one holding up the sky? That is the unpredictable variable you have spent a lifetime avoiding. Down in the comments below, I want you to tell me, what is the heaviest thing you are still carrying for someone else right now? We are going to leave it right here today.